So on with the show now. Something a bit more lighthearted, entertaining almost. Not for these people, but in the wider context of things going on. The kingdom of Kubala has come. The self-declared king of Kubala has been marching through the streets. Well, this was a couple of days ago, actually. This was on August 19th, so 2 days ago at time of recording. Marching through the streets of Scotland, telling people that they will bow down before the 12 tribes of Kubala, telling the Scottish people that they are not native to Britain. The Brits, they're not native to Britain. Of course not. It's the Kubalas that are native to Britain, right? Even though they say that their dubious claim, which even Grok will tell you is absolute bollocks, basically, goes back only 400 years. And obviously we know that there were native Scottish people here long before that. Long before that, right? But there was this giant African, seemed to be, I don't know if he is actually a giant, relatively big African man walking through the streets of Glasgow, shouting like an absolute nutcase, brandishing this big stick like a scepter, which he's banging on the fucking floor, right, as he's walking, telling them that they're not native, that they will bow before the 12 tribes of the Kubala. And, the Messiah has spoken is the caption of this video. So here you go, ladies and gentlemen. I'll bring it on screen for you now. I'll just make sure that it's working. One moment. This is entertaining, although it is an affront to Scotland, although it is an insult to the Scottish people and an insult to the British people. He also says King Charles isn't the king of Great Britain, by the way, which, as I'll get onto in a moment, in some way, I kind of agree with. But this is the video in question of this absolute nutcase. Probably belongs in, well, first off, doesn't belong anywhere near in our country, but second to that, probably a mental institution. Here is the quote-unquote king of the kingdom of Kubala, ladies and gentlemen. Video coming on screen now.
I am not taking it. The true heir of Great Britain. Charles is not the king of Great Britain. Now listen to me. White people are not the native of Great Britain. Just until 1600.
Bottoms up, ladies and gentlemen. That'll do. If you wonder why people are sick and tired, right? They're sick and tired of non-natives telling natives that they're not natives, and that's why they're so fucking angry. So that's been happening for time and time again. That's been happening across all of the Diversity Built Britain initiatives, all of these giant lies. And in fact, the clip that I posted up on X recently, but I also posted it on YouTube, highlights this perfectly. And in fact, I will go and find it a moment. I will go and find it. Because Sun Tzu once said that all warfare is based on deception, right? All warfare is based on deception. And I realize now that with us being at war, the deception that's been wrought against the British people, right, the Scottish people, the Welsh people, the English people, Irish people, is that they didn't build their own nations, right? And the dissemination through public teaching, through schools, through forced adoption in the workplace, right? I mentioned before that a previous workplace that I worked at tried to enforce net zero zealotry onto people by making them sign pledges on how they were going to personally commit to net zero, right? By falling away from faith in the Most High, right? All of these things. But the rest of the world are not only just like them, right, as in they're just like us in our Western European countries, right, but they're also superior in every single way, and that we are evil and inferior in every single way. And this has been a great deception that's resulted in us basically giving away our societies, right, It's not true, and it never has been. And now that we've realized that lie, now that we've realized the deception that has been done to us, right, and how much we've lost as a result of it, people are very, very angry. And now they're not going to react so politely when they hear this stuff. They're not going to react in such a way where we might have done it before. We might have just laughed like, oh, that's kind of cute. No, now that we've seen how much we've lost, now that we've seen how we have been at war, right, in a silent, cold war that really never finished since the since the end of World War II, been engaged in a kind of cold war that didn't even end with the end of the Soviet Union, right? There's this slow creeping infection that's been building over the UK, right, that politicians have taken advantage of. People are very, very angry. The sentiment in the UK is that it's ready to fucking blow. right? The sentiment in the UK is ready to fucking blow. And you see that not only in how many young people in particular, the generation that 30% of the younger generation, mind you, Gen Z, my generation, is missing, right? Due to being sacrificed on the altar of progress with abortion. We're talking about 800 million to 900 million people, right? A horrendous Holocaust taking place over, I can't remember the exact generation, but 800 to 900 million people that should have been here are not here because they were murdered in the womb. My generation, 30% of my generation was killed in the name of quote-unquote progress. Let that sink in for a moment, ladies and gentlemen. With all of that, as I said, people are very, very angry. People are turning to faith in a massive way, particularly young men. But not only that, I mentioned before that the climate is shifting so much, people are getting so radicalized that many now are outright turning to National Socialism, right? That's why I think some of the men, young men in particular, who have become very, very radicalized politically, doing so, returning to faith potentially for political reasons, which, you know, you can't help but think there'd be a problem with that, especially when you look at the relationship with, say, the Catholic Church and other churches with the Nazi regime in the 1940s, for example, that Pope Pius XII is one of the most misrepresented historical figures ever, right, for all the good he tried to do, and how much his, name has been slandered in many ways. But as people are really, really turning in a radical direction now. You've got the most radical young generation in history who can very, very easily be co-opted by those charismatic figures that done it nearly 100 years ago. You got to think that is scary as well. And it doesn't help then, as we'll get onto in a moment, that people who've been the historic enemies of these people and been persecuted by people in the 20th century under this ideology really, really don't make a good case for themselves sometimes. Let's get onto that in a moment. But here's the video, ladies and gentlemen, of what happened after the quote-unquote king of Kubala went in and made all these lofty promises, right, or lofty statements saying that the people of Great Britain are not native. They're not native, right? The white people are not native to Great Britain, basically erasing all of our heritage, right, all of our ethnic heritage, right? This is not our home. This is, of course, somehow a home for Africans, despite the fact that they have an entire continent called Africa, right? This is how the locals responded. They went in and pretty much burned it to the ground. They went in and pretty much burnt their settlement to the ground. Here's the footage of that for you, ladies and gentlemen.
This should be a crime scene. Imagine. This should be a crime scene. That's not his point. And your shoes? Your shoes survived. This means something. Oh, she survived. Thinking.
So you see the probably councilman there in the background?
This is your prophetess, Mary Tama, the queen of the Northern Kingdom. I am standing here on this mountain we've been dwelling for the last 3-4 months.
Oh, well. 3-4 months too long. 3-4 months too long. Yeah, so peaceful. You go in and tell people that you're going to make them bow down before you. At least that's what your king did. Maybe, if you're going to start doing these things, maybe don't do it when you're a little tiny, minuscule community, right? That's maybe the lesson that the Kubala can take from this. So if they're going to do this, maybe they have to wait until they're at least somewhat in a kind of majority or getting there, okay, at the very least. When you make up probably like less than 0.1% of the population of Scotland, maybe not a good idea, especially at a time when, as I said, people are very angry. People are very, very angry. Maybe don't go making lofty claims that you're basically going to enslave them and make them bow down to them and you're going to be their new messiah. Okay, a lot of these people, they still have a connection with the faith that has in many ways now defined over the course of 1,500 years or more, defined the nations. Right, you go back to St. David, who was around the time of 500 AD, right? This patron saint of Wales. You go back about 1,000 years to England, right? When Christianity mainly took over England, right? And how it spread from the Holy Land outwards, right? And basically took over the entire world, right? People still have that connection in large part. So they know who the Messiah is. We know who the Messiah is. So anybody claiming to be that, well, you better be able to make a very, very good case. You better be able to make a very, very good case. So I don't think you're going to make that good case. And you should be careful using words like that. You should be very careful using words like that, because this is going to happen. If you're a prophetess, prophet being able to see the future, by the way, or maybe not see the future, but at least, foretelling prophecy. I don't think you need to be a prophetess to be able to go, to be able to make the, forethought, if you will, to have the forethought to know that if you go in and do this, then maybe the locals are not going to react so well and you're such a small settlement that maybe they might just decide to snuff you out here and now. Right? So no sympathy whatsoever. You guys brought this on yourselves. You made bogus historical claims at a time when we have had enough of bogus historical claims as groups of people who are indigenous to these lands, and it makes the case all the more that we want you people gone. Makes the case all the more that we want you people gone. We're tired of our tolerance and we're tired of our empathy being used as weapons against us. Right? We were nice. We opened our homes to you. A lot of you people. We opened our homes to you. And this is how you repaid us. You repaid us by raping hundreds of thousands of our girls. Right? You repaid us by doing all manner of disgusting things. Turning our cities into, drug-ridden hellholes of child sexual abuse and all manner of degeneracy. And granted, we need to look at our part in that. As peoples, we need to look at our part in that. Absolutely. But it takes two to tango, as they say. It takes two to tango. So if you're going to do this, maybe wait. Maybe you should have waited until you actually had the numbers to make good on the claims that you were making. So, no sympathy. Kingdom of Kubala said completely illegitimate. It's a complete affront and insult to the Scottish people, and is an affront and insult to the Grand Mufti of England, as the Grand Mufti of Great Britain, quote-unquote King Charles, right, who's the Grand Mufti. That's actually where I will agree. That's actually where I will agree with the quote-unquote king of this kingdom, right, of this settlement, rather, that, we don't so much have a king, right, we have a Grand Mufti. So very often Prince Charles will open his addresses with Salam Alaikum, right? So we can only assume that at very least he has at least privately converted to Islam. Maybe not announced it publicly because he needs to keep his veneer of legitimacy, right? So otherwise the defender of the faith term means nothing, right? Because there's a specific faith that title is referring to. And if he's chosen to abdicate from that, he really serves no purpose. He really serves no purpose. And the royal family really serves no purpose. However, something that is quite creepy about this, if this post is to be believed, which I'll bring on screen for you now, the person I'm talking about. According to this post on X, from somebody in the comments says that they call this girl their handmaiden, and I'm wondering that, did they take this person from where they were from? Are we looking at a case potentially of abduction? That's what I'm thinking, because according to this post, a missing American woman has been found living amongst this tribe, this kingdom, right, in Jedburgh's woodlands in Scotland. Members of the tribe obviously claiming to reclaim, quote-unquote, reclaim the land that was stolen from their ancestors about 400 years ago. This is the lady in question. Right. Makes me think, did she come willingly? Did she go with these people for a sense of camaraderie or whatever? Or is there something more sinister at play here, which we really should be concerned about as a matter of somebody being abducted potentially? So this is the lady, allegedly, that was found, an American lady that was found living with these people, whom, according to some people in the comments of this post on X, which you'll find linked down below, they call her their handmaiden. So it makes you think, what relationship is there with her to these people? What relationship is there with her to these people? Did she, again, go with them willingly? Or is there even something more sinister at play here, which makes the dismantling of this settlement, and hopefully if there is something sinister at play, for example, maybe this woman did get kidnapped and she's now got some weird case of Stockholm syndrome or whatever, that maybe she can hopefully be returned to her family in the States. Hopefully. And we could actually do a good from this. Not only it's good that the quote-unquote kingdom, the settlement was removed, right, from polite Scottish society that was in the woodlands, right? Not to mention, however, the animals would be a lot safer. The animals would be a lot safer, obviously. But hopefully, maybe if this person was in fact stolen away from her relatives or from her home or whatever, or that she can be reunited with them and hopefully go on to live a much better life with better decisions, hopefully. Now that quote-unquote kingdom is out of the way and we can hopefully just look at it as a relatively humorous part of everything that's going on in the UK right now, which everything is so difficult to keep up with. Everything is so difficult to keep up with. It's ridiculous, right?